All right, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Interface. We're joined with Joe Fletcher this week. Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and I believe this is one of the only times that both of you have now done this live. So we get to do this live in person.
Exactly. Yeah, first
Mm.
in-person show. Usually we have guests from like all over the world, so it's hard to coordinate. But when we can get guests in Dubai, I think we both agree like, the conversation face to face is amazing. So
We're going to see how this goes. Going to see
how
where it
this
takes
goes.
us.
No pressure, Joe. No pressure.
Absolutely. No, but great to have you on, Joe. And yeah, like we said, we're doing a live show today. And Joe, I think just for the listeners, some people might know you already, but maybe you can tell us a bit about why you're in Dubai, what you've been doing over the past few years, and yeah, what drew you here.
Sure. I think the general introduction that I often go for is if you are connected to the internet, you've probably used or seen something that I've worked on. So early work with Microsoft Teams, DreamWorks movie production pipeline, IKEA smart home work. I worked in the US, I worked in Europe on all of that aforementioned products. And then a couple of years ago, I ended up having a great conversation with the current chief experience officer at Sapient. Been a friend of mine. Both of us live in Amsterdam or lived in Amsterdam. And I pretty much asked her, we've been trying to work together for 10 years. Now's an opportunity. Where do you want me to go? And she said, well, how about Dubai? So I packed up and I did the most rock star thing you could possibly do. I packed a piece of carry-on luggage, a cardboard box. I got on a one-way flight and I ended up here. I've been here for about 2 years now.
Oh wow.
Amazing.
What made you make that decision?
Uh,
'Cause you lived in different places, right? And then this opportunity came up and you just like, cool, pack the bag off.
yeah, yes. I don't like I'm not married. I don't have any kids or anything like that. So I was fairly fluid and mobile with what I can do. I've always sort of had a sense of adventure and what comes next. I did a very similar thing. I was out in Seattle working for Microsoft. I got this opportunity with Frog in Amsterdam. I had never really been to Amsterdam, but just sort of picked up, moved out there. Then I've been in Amsterdam for 12 years, figured, I think that's enough time. Now it's time for something new. I wanted to go somewhere else in the world. I didn't know where. Just turned out it was going to be here.
Oh, interesting, interesting. I heard something online, I think in one of your interviews that you learned like 300 words
In
when
Dutch?
yeah, in Dutch.
Oh my God. That was, I really should have started learning much, much earlier. Like one of the biggest issues I think with growing up in the US is you
Yeah.
only learn really one language. Now things are changing. A lot of people speak English and Spanish.
Mm.
I wish that my parents had me learn a second language growing up. I wish I could speak Spanish. When you move to Amsterdam, you don't need to speak Dutch.
Okay.
It is like everybody speaks conversational English. So I just got lazy. And then in the last year I was there, it's like, okay, now I really need to pick it up.
Mm.
And I just started studying. And it, like, unfortunately, I'm not the greatest with languages, probably because I never picked one up when I was younger. So yeah, I was like, I learned probably 300 words, still couldn't do a very good job of speaking it. And the sort of running gag was my friends who were au pairs there, they could kick my ass with 100 words. Just when you use it on a daily basis with children, I think a lot of barriers drop down. When you're an adult and you're trying to use it with other adults, you get super embarrassed by it. And I just sort of like, yeah, I think it's that weird thing that, especially as an adult, you never really want to be too embarrassed. And so you don't pick up a lot of new skills. We were talking right before we went on the air that like right after this, I'll go to Muay Thai. I just started that. And yeah, I have to be very comfortable with being very incompetent at it. But I think that's maybe going to be a running theme of the next hour as we talk about some of the AI stuff as well, because I think all of us are somewhat new to that. But yeah, where do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, I think Joe, you mentioned there about the not being comfortable, right?
Yes.
So I think we can start there because,
Love it.
you know, how are you feeling about the landscape at the moment and kind of getting used to this new way of working that we're kind of seeing now with AI, and how are you adapting to this new?
So we're going to jump right into tech, right into digital, right into AI.
I think,
Okay.
let's go.
All
Let's
right.
go straight in.
You know what? I'm gonna answer your question with sort of a very nerd, unique way of looking at this. For anybody that knows me, I have a very unusual routine. I wake up at around 3 a.m. And I do that because I want a lot of time up early in the morning to study, to do whatever, like prepare for my day. Sometimes I'll have calls with people in the US. Um, but one of the things I really missed doing that is I'll wake up and I immediately walk to a cafe here in Dubai. It's open 24 hours. I'll just sit there for hours. Sometimes I'll watch talks. Sometimes right now it's learning AI tools. One of the things I really missed that I figured this out was like old school university days where you'd stay up all night studying something. And now I'm talking to some friends about like, man, we should all get together and do like an old school lock-in. But that gets to me about the changing landscape of AI is like how you pick up these things and how you learn about these things. And a lot of times, I think the struggle that companies are having is making room to learn. And so when you ask me about the changing landscape, there is so much changing, but I feel it's with the younger crowd, the younger individuals who are picking up these tools, who are going in, who aren't having inhibitions about how do you run a normal product cycle? How do you run a normal tech cycle? I think that puts blinders on people a bit. And you go back to people who were in their early 20s, and there isn't any like, oh, we need to do product requirements. Then we need to do the UX and UI. Then we need to do the tech. It's just like, now we're going to sort of throw everything in a blender and figure this out. And that's what I'm trying to capture when I think about this waking up at 3 a.m. or doing like an all-night sort of lock-in is how do you bring people together and rethink the way that you work or just learn new things and change perspectives. Also, waking up at 3 a.m. definitely does change your perspective when you get to walk through Dubai Marina at 3 a.m. It can be quite a beautiful and interesting experience.
So what are you learning right now?
Cursor.
That's
what I've been trying to pick up. So I've been watching a lot of there's two things. I've been watching a lot of younger individuals, like let's say 18 to 23, 25, who are either in university or in their first job in the UX field. And I'll find people on YouTube who will just post videos like what it's like to enter UX right now, what it's like to be a part of that community. A lot of it is the anxiety of the job market and what AI is going to do. But a lot of it is also like, oh man, I can build stuff now. I can create stuff. Whereas before you would just go into Figma, or if you go back Sketch, or you go back further, Illustrator and Photoshop. Right now you get such excitement that you can envision something in your head and you can create it. For me, actually with Cursor is I'm starting at like a real entry level. I'm just like, build me tic-tac-toe, build me a Towers of Hanoi thing. 25 years ago in university, I came from a bit of a computer science background. Like I learned C, I learned C++, and I haven't done that for 25 years. So being able to go into an IDE, an environment where I can ask it to just create these things that I was creating before public key encryption, again, like tic-tac-toe, even like hello world, show me hello world in 10 different programming languages, just so I remember these things. The reason why I like that, I think so many people are rushing to this idea that you can create something without knowing coding or without knowing the language. I tend to find that a little bit dangerous. So I'm going the other way, like teach me a little bit more about the language so I know what's going on in the background and I can think through as I'm making decisions on the design. What does that actually mean? And what does that imply for technology? What does that imply for building these products?
That's interesting. You brought it back because I remember I was learning kind of C++ at university as well and building websites with it or databases and kind of building websites in Flash as well. And so like all this kind of older kind of like tech. And now we're in a space where like you said, like it opens up the doors where almost anybody can start designing engineering. But you mentioned a key word, which was like, you feel like this is dangerous. Like, why do you think that's dangerous?
If I go back to some of the people who are coming in right now to user experience, sometimes I don't want to say it's a lack of understanding. Maybe it's a lack of respect. And this could be just me being old and me being like grandpa and getting cranky at the young people. I feel when you don't have a good understanding of the history of how you got here, it's that classic, you're doomed to repeat it, or you just miss things. What's good about that is when you don't have history to, like encumber you with these things, you can go about just thinking up fresh new ways of looking at things. That being said, I think there is something about how we got here that helps you respect and understand what can come next. We can go off on that in, the next 15, 30, 45 minutes, but having an understanding of what got you here, I think helps get you to the next step, as long as you have a mindset that you don't get stuck in things. So for me, it's actually important of understanding what happens behind the scenes, right? So the way that I go back to it is everybody sort of has a camera on their, iPhone for me, but has a camera on their phone. That didn't remove the need for photographers. And I think people who are great at photography still have a good understanding of things like shutter speed and f-stop and just lens and what a DSLR is versus, a mirrorless camera and these types of things. And how do you go about constructing an image? Now, everybody can go and take a photo, right? But how do you actually think about the respect of photography that comes into it? And so that's the same for me as going to user experience. I tend not to be a fan of people who go like 12-week boot camp and then they sort of stop learning and they're like, well, no, I figured out enough to go down this path of UX. And even that term now bothers me because it's not used, in my opinion, properly, right? We use UI for the visual layer and UX for the interaction layer of a mobile application or a website, not the totality of the experience, which is if you go back, to early Norman Nielsen and all of the early stuff, you really think about the totality of the experience. Why do I think that's important going forward? With whether you want to say AI or the new devices that are coming up, wearables, augmented reality, we're going to start to break out of these individual screens and really have to think about the totality of the experience. So the way that we're using user experience now, to me, is a very narrow view of it. So, if I go back to why is it important to understand all these fundamental foundational elements, it's because for me, it's going to help us actually launch into what comes next. Again, as long as you have the right mindset and you don't get stuck there.
And you mentioned the mindset there, and knowing the background and knowing how things work, right, and understanding user experience. Do you feel like then, because obviously AI is very output driven at the moment, right? Where we kind of put an input in there.
I don't agree actually. So go for it. Now I get to ask you questions.
Yeah, sure. I mean, let me elaborate on that then. What I mean is it's very much like we prompt something and something comes out, right? But it's really dependent on how much you're giving it, right? And the mind that understands about what you mentioned there can give it a better prompt with a better output. So do you still think we're relying heavily on those strong individuals to drive better outcomes and outputs?
So here's where I'm going to throw it back towards both of you. What you just mentioned is, it's dependent on this output, right? But everything you just said points to the input being the important side of things. That to me is a shift of what we're going to experience in the next 3 to 5 years. Everything in user experience for the last multiple decades has been the output, has been the screens that I design. My hypothesis on this is what you just stated, that having an understanding of what goes to the input makes all the difference, because the output's going to be dynamically constructed and it's going to be all about the input that is going to be how you figure out what's important, what you have to teach it in terms of a context layer, what the devices are that you need to look at in terms of the output. But my hope is that most of this is going to be, programmatically generated, that it's going to take the components and the context and the history and then generate that output. But hit me back on that. What do you think about that? Because you said output, but then you talked to me about input.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I was focusing more on the output because you mentioned a bit about how, the background is important, right? Understanding around that. And I think, like I said, I do believe that we're very output driven, as you said, at the moment. We do need to be a bit more focused on what goal we're trying to achieve, in terms of why are we using AI, what we're using it for. I guess I'm just kind of fitting within the mold of what's happening at the moment. But coming back to what you said there, I think the input is going to be crucial, right? Like, even myself using it, I think back to when I've been working on AI. I still think in the way that I would deliver projects in terms of, the design experience, right? In terms of design thinking or how I might construct a prioritization method and putting that in there. But I guess if I didn't put that in there, if I didn't speak to it in that way, I wouldn't get the outputs that I was expecting to have,
So you're bringing up something that I personally love, and I'm going to expand on what you were just saying. Right now, the way that I feel like so many designers work, like the 80 or 90% of the bulk of people who talk about being in the UX industry, is they get a problem and they rush to Figma and they iterate on that problem, but they are thinking in terms of the output, right? They're thinking in terms of the mobile app or the website or the responsive website or the desktop application. What you just said, I think, is going to be so just damn fundamental that if the output is taken care of for us, when you get a problem, one of the things I think designers can be very good at, but aren't necessarily the best at right now, is going back and is it antagonizing or pressing on that problem? Are we asking the right problem? Are we looking at the right thing to solve? Then once you've figured out if that hypothesis is correct, as opposed to just rushing into Figma, what you just said, right? Like, are we having the right process or the methods? Are we looking at the right prioritization framework? What's the data that I have to work with? What are, now that I look at the output is much more sort of omni-channel, what are the platforms that I'm looking at building? What is the agent experience? What is the human experience? So there's all of these, to me, inputs or sort of middle ground that becomes so much richer and so much so much more interesting that's really captured my imagination. I hear so many people on, whether it's LinkedIn or whether it's at, could be universities, it could be, talks that I hear. People are concerned that AI is going to take our jobs as designers. I think that's because they get so focused on the output. I'm not worried about that. I feel like maybe that 80% bulk, they're going to sort of get squashed down to being glorified Squarespace designers, which that's great, right? There is a need for that because more and more people will need personalized sites. But I do see that if you maintain a level of depth in your respect for user experience, in the history of it, understanding really the process and the methods that get the best outcomes, you are going to rise up. There is going to be much more power. And this I'll say one more thing and then I'll throw it back to both of you. Thus far, with that output, so much of what you hire people on is the collection of their knowledge, right? The ability to acquire knowledge. If I look 3-5 years down the road, AI is already beating the crap out of us for acquiring knowledge. It is smarter than us. It is that ability to creatively apply knowledge that to me is going to become much, much more important. Goes back to that input, right? Like the output, that's great. That's fine. AI can handle that. It is the creative application of knowledge that comes all through that start and all through that middle ground that to me becomes so much richer and so much more interesting.
I have a parallel kind of train of thought, which I think in some ways kind of aligns with what you're both saying, but in other ways kind of has a slightly different kind of perspective. So I think that AI actually will replace a ton of jobs, if not nearly kind of all jobs, if it gets so good at the execution point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's already good enough today for a lot of people, for a lot of companies, right? So if someone wants to spin up a startup right now, it's good enough to get into the hands of customers, right? That's today. In 2-5 years time, it's going to be way better than what we see right now. Now, what I believe is, and there's a term being thrown around at the moment, which is crap in, crap out, right?
Yep.
Which means that if you don't understand the tech enough, and it's going back to what you're saying, right? You don't understand the history, you don't understand the nuances, the tweaks that you need to kind of make, how to be extremely kind of explicit and clear in your prompting, then what you're going to output is going to be crap. Now, there's only a few people, I would say, who have that deep level of kind of understanding about design, craft, problem solving, and just building products and technology. Therefore, my theory is teams will get a hell of a lot leaner, and those people who do kind of fully kind of understand those things, they're the cream that's going to kind of rise to the top. So I think both will happen. Like you are going to get, there's going to be more importance on those people who truly do understand. They can engineer a prompt extremely well to kind of get the best output. They can critically think as well. So not just take what comes out of the AI as fact, but just challenge it and say, well, actually, that's not quite right. You know, ask it questions, throw it back to it. So it kind of refines what it does output. But then there's going to be a hell of a lot of designers that are just focused on the output today who aren't learning fast enough or don't have that depth of knowledge that I believe are just going to get kind of taken over. Be interested to know what your thoughts are.
Let me throw one thing back at you first, which is for the individuals that you believe are going to rise to the top, what do you think is going to be the set of skills that makes that difference, that brings them to that higher level?
I think they need to truly understand the little details that make a difference when it comes to building a product, right? So anyone can just say, build me this because I have a PRD that has these requirements on, and kind of spit something out, right? But not everyone's going to be thinking about the little details in terms of the experience, or how can we elevate this experience, right? So once it's met the product requirement and it's kind of giving you a solution, they really start pushing it kind of like further, right? And say, well, how can we 10x this, right? Critically assess this solution by times 1,000, right? And just really start to kind of move those just those micro experiences, right? Just like start kind of like thinking about those kind of levels of details to really kind of tweak it. Like one thing that I think of is when Midjourney first came onto the map, right? Everyone was just like, okay, Elon Musk versus Donald Trump fighting in the MMA tournament and things like this. And then people started learning about it and say, well, actually, I want to create something beautiful. How can I kind of craft it better? And then you started learning, well, actually, like if I start speaking in terms of aspect ratios, right, and shutter speeds, and if I specify the exact camera type I'm going to be using, you get a completely different result. And only, I would say 80% again of people who are using Midjourney are still using it in a very kind of rudimentary kind of way, right? And only a few people are really tweaking those things, right, to get that. It might just be a micro optimization, but it could have a big impact to the experience. And I think it's those people that are really curious in that way that are really going to kind of make an impact in this space.
If I play that back, what I'm hearing is individuals who can craft a level of nuance that with everything that AI does by default right now, 2 years, 3 years from now, I don't know. But right now, everything that AI does, you sort of get this age of average, right? Or what is it? A sea of sameness, I think is the other one, if you love alliteration. So if you get everything that's sort of this average output, right? Like you said, it's 80% of the way there. That's good enough for most people, right? For like if you're selling cupcakes and you need a website, you don't need something that has a high level of craft and nuance. Well, maybe you do. But what I really like around what you said was it's the last mile. It is getting that level of nuance. It is getting that level of craft. I don't know if I agree with Airbnb's latest sort of rework, but everyone is going off about the level of craft in the icons that they built. I don't know if I agree with Liquid Glass, but everybody has the like view around the level of craft that Apple has put into specific areas of that. So I do agree that that will set people apart, that ability to fine tune the details right? But I find that will make the difference about most things, right? Because again, if you look at the UX field, is that not already what exists? It's just that we have a middle layer that may get pushed a little bit further down. But even for all those small mom and pop businesses, they're still going to need websites. People are still going to need some level of refinement, and there's still going to be a level of people that are being paid to create that, even if it just takes them a couple hours to do it. Like that's where I don't necessarily see jobs going away. I do see, as you just said, the bifurcation of like the top 10, 20% are really going to come up, maybe command a premium. And then you're going to have that bottom 80, probably 90, 95% that's really going to fill out just, I'm going to use AI to make a website that's 80% of the way there. It's going to cost someone a couple £100, and it's going to be great because it's just going to fill out this, the next 3 billion people that are on the internet that are going to need their own personal site, their own personal blog, these types of things. Like it seems like there's always, a level of people that are needed to do that. So that's how I'm seeing that. And I'm curious if you would.
Yeah, I think so. Just on that. So I think companies can have decisions to make, right? So you have a team of 20, say, right? 20 designers, product designers. Now, if say only 20% of those are really into UI, and you would say they're your cream of your crop in your team, whatever, right? But they're actually really into the tools, they're into UI, AI, sorry, and they are into the nuances, they are critically thinking, all that kind of stuff. And what they're able to output compared to, say, the other 80% of the team is miles apart.
Yeah.
Companies going to have to make a decision. Do we upskill the other 80% and give them the time and invest that time into them to get them up to the same level? Or do we still do the same amount of output with that 20% only and remove the 80% there and have a better bottom line at the end of the year? I think companies are going to have those kind of decisions to make, and some might decide to downsize their team and just have a very kind of lean team that are really great at crafting AI experiences. Others might go the other way and say, do you know what, like we are going to keep that team and we're just going to level everyone up.
Yes. And what I would ask you is, for the people that can be leveled up, or for people who are potentially not at current, those 10x players or whatever you want to say, what do you think makes the difference? Or what have you seen makes the difference between someone who can be leveled up and someone who probably can't be?
So I called it, so it's interesting because when I interview people, one of the questions I ask is this person coachable? Right?
Does the person have potential?
Yeah.
How do you assess that? Now I'm really interested in this.
So for me, it's like, it depends on what they're saying to me in the moment and the kind of use cases that they're putting in front of me. But I might challenge, kind of their approach, or if I think there might have been a better way, or maybe I'll put a PM hat on and, kind of think about, okay, like, how would you have done things differently? And if I sense that there's a very kind of like fixed kind of like mindset, then usually that kind of like tells me that either kind of this person is very kind of like set in their ways and it might not be as kind of flexible in their thinking, or might not be open to kind of new ideas. Then that kind of gives me a little bit of an indicator. But then there's other parts kind of the process that I might be able to kind of assess that too.
I'm going to ask a bit of a loaded question. So I don't know how old either of you are, but I'm on my way heading towards 50. And I'm curious, with what you just said on that sort of mindset, and you didn't use the word rigid, but that's how I'm sort of interpreting it. Do you see a delta based on age around that type of fixed mindset?
Interesting.
No, I can jump in there. I don't think age has a major impact, right? Because I think it's the curiosity, like you said, I don't think it's about how old you are. I always think back to, when we started having these new social media platforms, right? I think I skipped one or two. I skipped TikTok. I didn't have the time to really, get myself.
But you
into
got on
TikTok.
TikTok now,
I am
right?
on now. I am on now. Don't worry, I'm on now.
Got to have your first walk off of this podcast.
Yeah, that's definitely. But you know what I mean, right? I think there was, my mom or my dad or people that I felt were a bit older kind of were really struggling to get into those kind of platforms, right? But there were a lot of people that
My
did,
mum
right?
adopted it quickly.
Exactly. So there were some that did. And I think it's just the curiosity to see, hey, what is this about? And is that mindset there? And again, the time you mentioned earlier, Joe, right? It's sometimes it's a first time thing as well. Do those individuals have the time to really be curious and put their heads down? Or do they have that mindset to create the time to do it?
I think they can though, right? Like for instance, a lot of things that I hear is, we've got families, got multiple kids, haven't got the time to look into this AI stuff, right? But, I can speak for myself. Like I've got family, I've got 2 kids. I spend the time, I carve out the time to do it. I know other people, similar setups, even more kids, they spend the time to do it. Plus they get up early and go to the gym for 90 minutes and do a full days of work. So I think everyone's like situation can be different, but I think if that curiosity is there, like within inside you, and you're really kind of interested in these things and you really care about these things and how it might impact you in the future and, how you might be able to, for want of a better word, like still remain kind of relevant in your industry, then I think you will kind of carve out some time to find out.
Before we went on the air, we were talking about design leadership and these types of things. And I know you're over, I think you're still at Kareem. I haven't checked your LinkedIn.
Still there.
You're at Landmark. And then how do you think about scheduling your day to leave time to actually learn these new things? And this has been something that I've talked about with myself and with other, whether it's design managers or design executives. Like, how do you think about crafting and creating time in your day to either think through big problems or learn these new tools? Because right now we got both problems and new tools.
I think for me, new tools, I tend to kind of do most of that in my own time. And I do a lot of experimentation kind of within kind of office hours as well. So whatever I've learned, I try and kind of bring it in. I would definitely say I'm quite lucky that Kareem as an organization is very optimized towards being extremely AI driven. They've set up kind of departments. We've got multiple weekly AI learning sessions within the day as well, where people are learning AI and they're learning how to prompt properly. They're learning what should the latest tools and having jamming sessions on those kind of things, right? And so we're extremely encouraged to use and embrace AI. But one thing, again, like it comes down to personal circumstance of what your routine is. But I'm up early, go to the gym, drop the kids off to school, and then I'm in the office by 8:30 a.m. Most of the company don't come in for at least 90 minutes after that. So I've already got a little bit of an edge where I can start to explore things that are in my mind or explore different tools, etc. But when it comes down to the team itself, like I try and give them the space to use AI, right? So if they're thinking out problems, I ask the questions like, how might you use AI to kind of solve this kind of particular problem? And some of the team have come up with some amazing things. When Figma launched their new suite of AI tools, I straight away went to our account manager and said, speed up or accelerate the process for us to get these tools. And they did.
We have the same account manager.
So
right?
I don't know, maybe
for Figma?
Maybe.
Is it what is it? Arthur? Is that
Yeah.
Everybody knows this guy. Everybody all over the
Well,
UAE knows this guy.
Man. So it's like I try and get in there first, and he sped up the process of kind of allowing us to get things like Figma Make, for example. Like, I was really curious about that. It's like we have to have it. Like sites, we're not really going to use that much.
Yeah.
Make, there's like some real value that we want to explore in that. How quickly can we get that in? And we weren't meant to have it as soon as we did, but we did. And that tool's been really cool. Like the team have been able to kind of explore different ways in which they can maybe use animation, right? Or can make a static experience more engaging or make a prototype more useful, right? And that just accelerates their process.
So far, well, actually, I'm not going to launch into another question because you need to answer this too. I'm curious how you make time to look at these new things.
Yeah, I think for me, it's more around, okay, so if I'm working on something, uh, if I would usually not use AI to do it, I'll try and use AI to do it. So that's a way that I've found that it's really easy for me to then to just adopt things. So a good example of that was, I wanted to create a quick prototype just to kind of talk about what we wanted to do or what the vision was of where the direction we wanted to go with a specific project. Instead of me just jumping into Figma quickly, mocking something up, I decided to do it in AI, right? And kind of do some prompts and kind of get it to generate something. So that was where I was kind of like getting my head around VO or V0 even,
Yeah.
and just understanding how that kind of works. And I tried also Bolt and a couple other tools just to kind of see the difference. So again, that was just a use case where, okay, I'm not working on a heavy project, but I now understand how these tools work and the level of detail I need to go into and which one kind of worked better for me in that regard, So yeah.
I think this is important as a leader as well, because one thing that I realized, so I became a leader quite early in my career, got kind of catapulted into that position, and straight away, and I hear this from a lot of design leaders, you get further and further away from the tools, from the craft,
Yep.
and it's not necessarily a bad thing. You got a job to do, a very serious job, and there's a lot of responsibility. But one thing that I realized was I can't be completely out of the tools that my team are using. And the reason I believe really strongly about that is because I believe that if I understand the tools, or doesn't necessarily have to be as well as the team does, but if I understand it well enough and I'm curious about what is going on in that space and how it's evolving and what new features are going on, I've played around with them, etc., I can continue to add value at that level too as well. So when it comes to AI, all of these new tools are kind of coming up, etc. All this experimentation is happening. No one knows what the future tool is going to be yet. But at least if I explore these myself as a leader, I've got an opinion, and then we can have these discussions, which might lead to a result for the team.
It's interesting. I've like my ability to use Figma is not very good, right? Like, but if I have to have a conversation about interaction design or visual design, I feel very confident and capable of my ability to talk about common controls or responsive websites or any of that. But I think through my career, which is now heading around 25 years, I've seen so many tools come and go that I've just sort of like let them go by the wayside. But that's why I find understanding the constructs so important of these things, because at some point Figma may end up going by the wayside and something new is coming up. That's why when I go into Cursor, I'm curious about, let me remember the fundamentals, because maybe Cursor will stay around, maybe it won't. I don't know. But I think the most, again, I don't know if this sounds old, but it feels like the most dangerous thing to me is I can do something that I don't really understand what I'm doing. And that, again, maybe it's just me, that scares me a little bit, only because I feel like there's not a proper respect and control there. However, what I will throw out is I'm a big guitar person. And what I have found so unique in the last 5 or 10 years is guitarists who have come up and don't necessarily like listen or understand guitar in the same way. And they have created completely new styles. Whether there's this great guitarist, I think his name is Matteo Mancuso or something. He doesn't use a pick, he uses his fingers, but it sounds like a pick. But because he has, 3, 4, 5 of these, he can play so much faster and more unique than you'll see from almost anybody else. And it's been something because he didn't have blinders on over like, I have to use it in this way, that he just completely changed the way that you could think about playing and working. And I have this dual sort of perspective in my head that is my inability to let go of some of these things going to harm me in the future, because I have this certain stance. I'm always questioning myself. I'm always questioning, like, is the design process needed? Do we have to go through this, as you talked about with a BRD, and then you just, do I have to go through that? Or, can I just start right at the beginning, creating 100 different versions of an application, toss those out and say, okay, test it and figure it out. Like these are the things that I will say keep me up. I'd say at night, but wake me up at 3 a.m. because those are the bigger strategic questions that I'm like, yeah, working with Sapient, you go back in. Right now, we're questioning our whole product delivery process. And we're going through it. And I just had this conversation last week where I work with a couple central people looking for the global company, how we do our, what we call the PS how, the Publicist Sapient, how we work and how we go out to clients and all this. And we were talking about it, and it just was like, it sort of felt the same. And I was like, is our inability to say, should we just throw out the entire organization we have? And if we had to start blank sheet of paper, would we start in the same way? And that's why I like going back to YouTube and saying, let me watch these people who are 18, 19, 21, 22 talking about what it's like to get into user experience right now, because I hope that they are going to give me some completely new perspective that is going to blow my mind. And what I just said about creating 100 apps, that's what someone has been challenging me with lately. They're like, I don't understand why you would put together features or even think in that way. Just think about what's the app you want to create, ask it to create it in 10 different ways, and then go out with users and test that. Like, why are you even thinking in features? And if my initial sort of gut reaction was like, what do you mean? Of course, because I need to think about what's the vision and what's the problem to be solved and all of this. And the person was like, you sort of go in this direction and you sort of figure it out. But what you're sounding like is going to take a really long time. What I'm sounding like is within a week, I'm going to build all of this stuff. And in my second week, I'm going to figure out what works. And you're still going to be thinking about what's the vision of this look like. And I don't know if I agree or disagree, but I love that conversation. I love someone coming to tell me that you're probably wrong on this. Because I think for someone being 25 years in their career and saying, hey, you have to respect all the history and you have to know everything that came before it, I think there's something very, very powerful to say, screw you, I'm just going out and doing it this way. And this way is maybe it's going to work.
Interesting. I wonder.
Both of you were like, okay, now we're involved in this.
Yeah. Do you know why? Because I see a lot of like LinkedIn posts about like people just ripping apart designs based on this UX law, this UI principle, etc.
Oh God, don't go down.
What you're saying is there might actually be space for breaking some rules or breaking some processes, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, And because I like to challenge like the status quo a bit, and I think we do have a lot of rules in design and UX, but I think sometimes you can bend them, even break them, and maybe you'll get a better result. I think it's hard to innovate when you're trying to stay too kind of close to these kind of historic and like processes or kind of governance systems. But
I mean, like I go back to some of this guitar stuff. I just found this guitarist. I think his name is Ando San. And he has, I think it's an 8-string guitar, but the baritone part he plays like a bass, and then the top part he plays with his fingers. So it has like this jazz feel where it's these two things combined. And if you talk to somebody, you'd be like, no, in jazz, or he sort of does like I don't know how to describe it, honestly. It's like a hip hop jazz type of feel. But I think people would always say, oh no, you need to separate these things out. You need the drums, you need the bass, you need the guitar. And I feel like this guy's like, nope, I'm just going to throw everything together and I'm going to put every instrument in this one guitar. So the way that he plays the bass side with his fingers sort of mimics the drum side as well. And it creates this super unique sound. And by blowing away this whole construct of things need to work in this way, he has created something that I have just like, I've never heard in what this person does. And so I think there is something to that by saying like, yeah, the normal design process is you have a hypothesis and then you iterate on that, versus what this person was telling me is like, you want to go in this direction, just boom, you create a bunch of stuff right there and then you just narrow it down. So it's like a weird triangle type of thing. I said, don't you need a hypothesis? Like, why? Just start going in a direction of the general space you want to go in. And now if you can create infinite output, theoretically, why do I need to really have a hypothesis? I'm just going to create that infinite output and let the market determine what that job to be done is. And then I'm going to start narrowing down. And I'd like it felt like an odd way of approaching the typical double diamond design process. But at the same time, I was like, yeah, I don't agree with it. But now I'm sitting here talking to both of you about it. So there's something that stuck in my head that said, yes, it is good to challenge that design process and to say, what are the ways that we can change it? Now, if I were going to start a team, I just had a discussion because I go back to that Publicis Sapient how, right? How we run the product delivery process. My thing is, no, I wouldn't start with the features and functions. I'd probably take what we think of as our 5 capabilities: strategy, product, experience, engineering, data. And instead of having those sequentially or linearly, I would just say there's 5 people in a team now. All of those people start up front. All of them sort of bleed into each other, but people have a bit of a T-shaped thing. That, again, goes back to my interest in learning a little bit more of the programming side. But everybody works together. And so the strategy isn't what you're doing up front. The strategy is going throughout. The tech isn't what you're doing at the back end. The tech is also where you start. So it creates this weird, like the movie Arrival, where the aliens were sort of living in all time at every moment. It was sort of like time didn't exist in the same way that we think of it as a linear process. It's just everything was compressed. I'm like, huh. Is that what it's going to look like in the future, where you just get a bunch of smart people together, people have a certain inclination, and you stop thinking about things linearly and you think everything runs in parallel?
I need to watch that one again. I haven't seen that in a while.
That's a really,
Adams, right?
a really good movie. And it took me like 3 times watching it to really respect how the differences in time worked. It was like I had to watch, oh, come on, help me out here. What was that movie with backwards, forwards here? Tenet.
Oh, yes.
Right. And I had to watch that like twice to really sort of get what was going on. And I like that better than Inception, which felt like it was just, you didn't need to go that far, dude.
Yeah.
You could have pulled it back. I should go watch that movie, actually. I should go watch Tenet tonight. Man, that sounds good.
Yeah. And Joe, I want to come back to what you're saying there, because I'm glad you came back to the team setup, because I was going to ask you that question, because you mentioned about the lines being blurred, though.
Yeah.
Because, many CEOs out there will say, okay, well, you spoke about those 5 individuals in the function. Do I need 5 anymore? Have the lines blurred where I only maybe need 3? Because with the tools, people can now do a bit more, right? I could maybe get more data, or I could maybe speed up the design process, or maybe I don't need a PRD anymore. Maybe someone else can pick that role up. How do you see that going forward?
Yes. Yeah. I think it depends on what you're making. But no, do I think that you need a designer on the team? Not necessarily. I go back to that idea that you need the creative application of knowledge. That doesn't mean user experience. There are plenty of creative technologists. There are plenty of creative product owners. So if you give them the right tools, they could potentially go and create design. Right. So if you say that you can harness, somehow that power of a UX mind, and you give it to a technologist, they're probably going to be able to create amazing user experience work. There may be things, as you go back to that level of nuance, whether that's a micro interaction, whether that's the way to use controls or components, whether that's a new way about thinking of how to deliver a service. Right. But no, I don't think you're, in 5 years from now, especially, I don't think you're really stuck with a particular industry. I think it things bleed much more into each other. I don't know. What is your thought on that? And as I'm saying this, I'm like, do I believe that? What is your thought on this?
Yeah, you mentioned about the minds there. And my thinking is that it's going to be based on individuals, I do believe. I think that individual with the mindset can now deliver something potentially on their own, right? Because if I understand a bit about how a product function works, if I understand about how to execute something, I understand a bit about development, I should be able to potentially deliver something from end to end. But it all comes back to the theory and the mindset, understanding of how great products are built. So who are those individuals? I don't know. We're talking about unicorns now. But yeah, I don't think we need an individual for every single function going forward. I don't know what that individual will be, but yeah.
I want to cue off something you just said, which was the word unicorn. And I'm curious because if we go back to what a unicorn used to mean, it was somebody who had like technical knowledge and UX knowledge and product knowledge. It was these rare individuals that had a broad collection of knowledge. If we think now that it is about the creative application of knowledge versus the accumulation of knowledge, number one, do unicorns change? Are they as rare as we think they are? Like everything that we've been talking about feels like it's the future is all about mindset. I'm just sort of curious how, when I say that, what's your response to that? How do you think about structuring your teams around that? Do you even hire people that have any background in UX? So I just went off the first 45 minutes of this, how you need to have a respect for UX, how you need to understand the history. Am I wrong on that? Do you just hire people that have the greatest mindset and you say, this is where we need to go? You figure it out.
It's a tough one to answer. And it's something we've been toying with as well. But I think, look, I want to put the tech side to the side, right? Because I still believe we need developers. I don't believe that these tools are in a place where we can just spin up things.
I agree. I'm with you. Okay, so we agree on this.
So we agree on that one. And also, don't forget, like the tech side, it's great to create new things, but when we're optimizing things, you need people that understand the platform, the system to slowly iterate and stuff, right? But let's focus on product design. You know, you mentioned analysts there as well. That's the great question, right? Would we hire more UX focused people? And I'm probably biased because, you know, I come from a UX background, but in my opinion, is it less of a resistance to get someone that's strategic in product to understand more about the user experience, which takes quite a long time to kind of get your head around and fully understand all the process, right? Or is it easier for someone that already understands the UX process to learn a little bit more about the business side of things, right? What's the path of least resistance? I think that's what I'm kind of toying with my head is, I don't know what you think about that, Joe, but
well, I mean, I go back. I can't project much more than even 3 to 5 years. Is sort of ridiculous at this point to say. But what we seem to be coming to a sort of natural conclusion here is that there is some level of the top 10%, and that needs to have a depth of knowledge. In order to creatively apply it, there has to be some level of depth to understand what you need to creatively apply. And I go back to what I said at the beginning. You have everybody that has cameras that has not relinquished the need to have photographers. You have everybody now with GarageBand who can make music that has not, stopped the need of having a great band or a great songwriter. As you democratize tools, I don't think you remove the need for people who have real true depth and true knowledge. I think you actually open it up to a lot more people. That's why I don't see UX jobs going away. I actually see more coming up. I see more jobs, more potential for that. It's just the top of the top of the top. It's going to be those people who are a little bit stronger, a little bit better, the people who are making the time, who are finding the time to go and invest, whether that is at work, whether that is outside of work. It is that mindset that I think drives and caters you into the future.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like we said, it's the mindset, right? And it comes back to that. And look, it's hard to predict where we're going to go. And I think for people looking to set up their teams, I think these are great questions to ask yourself, right? And things to consider. And Joe, speaking more on the future, any advice that you would give, people in the industry going forward, apart from learning tools, any other advice you'd give them to kind of stay relevant in this ever-changing market?
I'm going to give you an anecdote that I think will summarize this. When I travel, I tend to be all over the place. I will stay at the 5-star hotels, and then I'll go and stay at hostels. A few years ago, I was at a hostel in Berlin, and I was in the common area, community area. And I heard this woman, fairly young, probably 22, 23, talking, and I could tell she was talking about UX stuff. Thought, oh, this is pretty cool. I don't oftentimes meet like UX individuals in a hostel. So when she hung up her call, I just said, oh, excuse me, it sounded like you were in UX. Oh yeah, I'm a UX researcher. Oh man, like, tell me about, what you do and all of this. And she's like, well, I know all 6 methods. And I was like, oh, interesting. Like, what do you mean by that? Well, the 6 methods of research. I was like, oh, there's 6 methods? Yes. And I know them. It's like, oh, okay, but are there possibly more there? Like, what? No, and she was just steadfast that there are 6 methods. She knew them. And like, this was what was going to propel her career. And that is sort of the story of the antithesis. I think that is going to propel anybody of success forward. That if you get stuck into ways of doing things, you are just not going to progress. And so everything that is encapsulated in that story, no matter of age, I think you need to be open, willing, and able to say there are new things. While it is healthy to have a great respect for the history of what has come before, use that as a way to propel you into the future. Don't get stuck by it. Don't put your blinders on. Always be asking, like, but what if I'm wrong? Because history is littered with things that we have thought and believed up until the point that we were proven wrong. And so everything that I ask my team, and I will go to my team and say, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, and I'll try to do this on a common basis, because I think one of the hardest things as you move up as a design leader is for anybody to tell you what you're doing wrong, because just by de facto of being the leader, people don't want to bring you bad news or tell you, hey, I think you sort of suck at this, right? But you need to invite that because you need to figure out what your blind spots are. So it does really come down to mindset, flexibility, agility, humbleness, being able to say that while I'm heading towards 50, the people who are 17 just getting into this field probably have a hell of a lot to teach me.
I completely agree. I think you need to have that flexibility in your mindset. And this is why I have like a real issue with, I think I mentioned it before, like around laws and all this kind of stuff. I think it's good to have a firm grasp of these things, but I feel like if you want to innovate, you can try and innovate with the laws, but I think sometimes you need to kind of bend the rules and sometimes kind of break them. And you only do that through curiosity, right? Like questioning, why is it this way, right? How long has it been this way for? Does it still serve us? Is there a different way? Have we explored anything? Has anyone explored anything? Like just asking those kind of questions, because in our space, I think it's important to continually kind of innovate, right? And you mentioned like Airbnb earlier, and like what they did, like not everyone, again, like it divided the design community. Like even within my team, half the team thought it was amazing, half the team thought it was a load of nonsense. But the innovation was not the fact that the icons move. It was they're using a slightly different mechanism to do it. So it's a video kind of icon, not necessarily using a Lottie file, not using a GIF. Do you know what I mean? So they've introduced something new that other design teams can now use. That's the innovation, right? They thought a bit differently. So I think if we always stick to convention, then we're always going to be within these confines of like a jail in a way, right? Between these kind of 4 walls. I feel like we need to constantly try and push and break through.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you. And I guess one of the last things that for me to wrap up with is everything is one way until someone can prove it's not. And I was telling you before we went on the air, I was working for a banking client right now. I think one of the things that somebody on my team came to me and was like, this isn't really innovative. And I thought, how narrow-minded. And so I challenged that person. I was like, yeah, banking was boring until Revolut came along. Insurance was boring until Lemonade came along. Everything from a design perspective can be boring until you make it not. Everything can be one way until you make it another. So I think it is absolutely fundamentally critical that you continue to question and you continue to say, even if this isn't the right answer, you have to go out after some type of exploration. Even if you don't head in the right direction, at least you will poke something new into the field of human knowledge.
100%. See, Warren's in deep thought right now.
Yeah, no,
You're reflecting on the
some
conversation.
really great points, and yeah, like I think some great takeaways for anyone listening, Joe. You know, and I think it's about just that adaptability, keeping yourself at the forefront, and thinking outside the box, right? Continuing to think outside the box. Joe, that wraps things up really nicely. And look, I'd love to just know where can people find you, or what's next for you, Joe?
I mean, what's next for me is still staying here, still waking up early. I am loving the sort of boring lifestyle that I have at the moment. Although I live in this odd startup sort of apartment where I have tinfoil on the windows now to shut out the light. But yeah, what's next for me, I think, is leaning a lot more into this. One of the things I'm actually most excited about is trying to get a few people from my team to pull an all-nighter and with me at like a 24-hour cafe and just explore all of these tools and go back to like what it was in university, where everybody could say just like there aren't roles, there aren't responsibilities. It's just everyone sort of piling in and trying to study. But in terms of what's next for me beyond that, I have absolutely no idea. I'm just trying to sort of get by day to day, explore what I can, find what's new, push whatever boundaries I can, and hopefully inspire my organization and tell everybody just keep reaching, keep trying things. Sorry, it's not a more crazy inspiring answer, but it is just continue to be crazy on a daily basis.
And if anyone wants to reach out and contact you, is LinkedIn the best platform?
LinkedIn is the best way.
You're on TikTok?
I am on TikTok, but I have some weird username. I don't follow anybody. I just use it to randomly scroll before I sleep. LinkedIn is the easiest way to find me. Joe Fletcher on LinkedIn. I think actually it is linkedin.com/Joe Fletcher 2. I believe.
There's another one.
Yes, there is another person. But if I go to what was it? Was it I think Facebook, which I never use anymore. I got the first Joe Fletcher there. So I was like waiting. I was like counting down, waiting for them to launch that. And I was like, I got that name. But yeah, LinkedIn is the best place. That's where I post the most, especially about anything work-wise.
Amazing. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Great conversation.
Thank you so much. And since we're all in the same area, I hope we get to do this again.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.